So my name is Leslie Pittman and I'm the current chair of ILIG, and I am delighted to welcome Yohanna Anderson as today's speaker. Yohanna is the subject librarian at the University of Gloucestershire, but I think we know her better as a leading campaign for libraries for some years, and most recently as one of the leaders of the Ebook SOS campaign, a grassroots campaign to challenge the remarkable, one could say scandalous, pricing and access models offered by ebook publishers to libraries. Yohanna is going to speak to us about the campaign in the UK and internationally. It is incidentally not the first time that she has addressed an ILIG audience. I don't know if she remembers. 10 years ago. You do? 10 years ago, she talked. So every 10 years, Yohanna comes and speaks.
And then there's an economic crisis and my plans go wrong.
Because we pay so much. No. So 10 years ago, almost exactly in 2012, she talked to us about her master's research into library aid for developing countries. So she is an old ILIG hand. It's very good to have her back with us again and on such an important topic. I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions. So just so that we can manage it, I think add any that occur to you to the chat as we go along. And I shall pick them up at the end, and then there should be time for discussion and we can raise hands. Finally, as you will have seen, please note that this event is being recorded and will be available later on our YouTube channel, along with all the other ILIG talks that you're very welcome to catch up with later. So over to you, Yohanna.
Thank you, Leslie, and thanks everybody for coming along. There seems to be a really diverse group here, which is great. Yeah, as Leslie said, I did speak at ILIG all those years ago when I had possible plans of turning my research into a PhD or whatever, and then the financial crisis hit and all the funding dried up, and that's a different story in a different dimension. So yes, I'm going to share my screen. So you should be seeing an embedded video. Can you see that, Leslie?
Yes.
Right, okay, so that was, are you just seeing my slides now, Leslie? Or are you seeing my whole computer screen view? You're on mute.
I can see your slides.
Just your slides. Right, okay, great, because I can see you and I can see me, but so I didn't know what exactly I was sharing. Clearly very professional of me. Yeah, so that video is a animation that we made with some software that we used to try to demonstrate the difficulties of ebook acquisition to people who don't know the ins and outs of it, because it's fiendishly complicated. And as soon as you say we don't have enough money for this, that or the other, people's eyes glaze over, because librarians always say that. And you go into the complexities of ebook licensing and people switch off. So we try to make it as accessible as possible. But for this session, I'm going to talk about a bit of the context, and I'm sure a lot of people here are going to be very familiar with the problem. As Leslie said, I'm an academic librarian, so I am really presenting this from an academic librarian's point of view. But it does apply to all sectors, so government libraries, law libraries, health libraries, public libraries, everything, every sort of library. So this campaign isn't exclusive to academic libraries. That's just our expertise is in academic libraries. I've got some data I'm going to share with you that we've collected on the issue. I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of the ebook crisis, the ebook campaign in the UK and internationally, and what we might do next on the topic. So Leslie, as you probably are aware, I'm quite prone to waffle, so please feel free to cut me off if I'm running over. As hard as I try, I tend to get carried away on the topic, so do shut me up if I'm going on a bit. I won't be offended. So before COVID, the COVID pandemic, we already had a lot of precariousness in the ebook market due to ebooks being licensed rather than owned. Only 10% of titles were available to universities in electronic format. Ebooks were prohibitively more expensive than the physical book already. There were lots of complex licensing models. Titles could be withdrawn at any time. So because we didn't own the content, we had no control over what happened with the titles. Also, for those of you that don't know, Dawson Era were the company that provided a large proportion of the academic market with ebooks. And in 2018, 2019, they collapsed, and so universities faced losing a lot of their electronic content, which was a massive problem for a lot of us. There was a lot of panicking about what we were going to do, because obviously we'd invested a lot of money in this content and it was just going to disappear. ProQuest stepped in, and we did maintain access to a lot of our collections, but I think it just proved to people how precarious ebook provision was because we didn't own that content. We've experienced loss of control over our collection. So with our hard copy books, we could use them, we could lend them out as interlibrary loans. You can't do that with ebooks. We had control over our own loan periods. So if a book was in high demand, we could decrease the loan period if we wanted to. Put them on short loan. We can't do that with the ebooks. It's very much dependent on the licensing that we've purchased from the providers. And if a book is suddenly added to a reading list and we've only got a single user license and there's 200 people on a module, we face serious difficulties in making that book available to all students. So already we were experiencing some difficulties, and then COVID came, and as I'm sure you're all aware, the proverbial hit the fan. We didn't know what to do about the situation. So we were scrabbling around trying to find ebooks that we could provide to our students so they could study from home and carry on their studies. Initially, a lot of publishers to great fanfare, made their items available for free to academic libraries. Ever being the cynic that I am, I try to avoid promoting those packages to our students, because I knew that it would be very short-lived and publishers were likely to use this as a marketing opportunity and were likely to ramp up the subscription costs at the end of this free period. And then once you've got students hooked into these resources, it's very hard to explain to them why they are no longer there. So I could see this coming down the line. Some universities did sign up to these big packages and have had a lot of difficulty in maintaining those collections going forward. So I was sitting at home in my spare room, desperately trying to get these resources for students, and I was spending hours and hours searching across multiple different suppliers, because we have several different suppliers in our university, and one ebook title can cost very different amounts of money for one supplier than they do from another, and the licenses can be very different. So we had to go through and look at all the different licenses, see which was the best deal, see which was the one that worked for us, and then often by the end of it, it said something like the book wasn't available in your region anyway. So I was spending a lot of hours searching for ebooks that weren't available at the end of the day anyway. And I was wasting a lot of time. Everybody was finding life stressful. I was trying to navigate the pandemic myself personally. I was going through a huge bereavement myself with a member of my family. So I just found it really stressful. So at a loss of what to do, I ended up yelling into Twitter, as anybody that follows me will know. And a lot of librarians were sharing my concerns. I was sharing the prices that we were being charged for ebooks. But a lot of librarians were a bit afraid of doing that because publishers are notoriously litigious. So, and what we did, or what somebody did, was compile an anonymous spreadsheet on Google Docs so that people could share the data. And I'm just going to show some of it to you just to illustrate some of the issues that we were facing, because it often makes more sense to people than me just waffling on about all the different problems. So hopefully this is going to work. So this is some of the data that was crowdsourced, and this column shows you the percentage of increase in the price that the ebook, a single user ebook version of a title, is compared to its hard copy version. So this is what made a lot of people kind of stand up and take notice, was these figures are not just a few special cases. This is becoming the norm, and it is pretty common. So this one here is 396% more expensive than its hard copy equivalent, 799% more expensive than the hard copy equivalent. We were going up to the thousands percent more expensive than the hard copy equivalent just for a single user ebook. Obviously, for obvious reasons, that's not sustainable. This data is publicly available, and I provided a link in the previous slide. I will share these slides so you can go, because there's a lot of resources on these slides. You can go and have a look in more detail if you wanted to later on. But one of the most telling factors of that spreadsheet was we put a comments box, a comments column in, so that people could, because it's not just about pricing. As I've mentioned before, it's about complex licensing. So in the comments box, I think, is where it was really stark about the challenges that librarians were facing. So you can see clearly where the prices rocketed in 2020 as opposed to the ebook prices previous to COVID. So this was a single user book that was £29.99 via Dawson's, which is the provider that collapsed, and it was now being supplied by ProQuest for £287 for a single user license, and then Askew's £598 for a single user license, and then you get the £1,795 for a 3-user license. So I think you can see a massive jump in the prices there, and this was quite common across the board. I'm just going to see if I can change get rid of my speaker videos because it's blocking my, okay. So we were also starting to see an increase in what we call exploded licenses. So licenses for ebooks where we only had a year's access to that book, and then we'd have to pay again, which you don't get with hard copy. But it wasn't just the £21.99 that this single user ebook originally was being charged. It had gone up to £1,000, £1,099 for one user for 365 days. So it was replaced in August 2020 at a price increase of £1,077. I don't think it can be disputed that this was price gouging. We were increasingly seeing ebooks being put into packages. So this book was a book that was only available through Springer's criminology collection of 257 titles at a price of £7,140. This is okay if there's possibly if they're all titles that you want, but often academic librarians only wanted, there was a particular title that was needed for a reading list, so you'd have to pay £7,000 for a collection of books in which you only wanted one of those titles. And in this case, the spending had to be over £5,000 with the publisher in order to get access to that one individual title. So it's bundling in a similar way to what banks would do, which the Competition and Markets Authority ruled against quite recently, where banks were bundling services, which is another story, but it's a similar market manipulation strategy. There were similar extraordinary results from books that were really dated as well. So there was this book that the person that contributed to the spreadsheet put this in red, highlighted this in red because they were so shocked. So £1,000 a year for an 8-year-old book that costs £26 in print, and that is either 365 day expiry, or you could get 400 credits and then you'd have to buy it again. So this was £1,052. We were getting similar. We were getting one of the most annoying things for me during the COVID pandemic, and it's continuing, is suppliers like Sage, where they were saying you can only access this book for one user at a time, 365 days a year, and then you've got to pay again. But otherwise, this title is a price on application, and it's done by a case-by-case study, and you have to provide the course it's required for, your name, the institution's name, how many students are estimated to use it. We don't have to do that for hard books in our library. How many people do we expect to use this hard copy? I mean, that's just ridiculous. It takes up so much time trying to calculate that, and then if the book isn't used that amount of times, or if the academic decides to take it off their reading list, we have prepaid for books that aren't being used in the way that we anticipated, because often we can only guess, and it would take up, and if you buy in thousands of books every year, that takes up a ridiculous amount of time from acquisitions teams in case by case costing by providers like Sage, and it's also lacks any transparency. So they can be charging one university £7,000 to access the book, and another university maybe £100, and we have heard cases of that. I alluded to this before. Often you go through looking through the different providers to find the best price, and then you'd place your order, and then you'd get a message back saying there's no sales rights in your area, which is infuriating. This is an electronic resource. It shouldn't have geographical boundaries, but they do, and that was becoming more and more common. So we got examples like this one, where there was an ebook that was £807 for a single user license, and then the commenter noted that this is actually available via an open access link. So who knows why the VLE platform was charging this much money, and it's just, yeah, anyway, there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. We're getting towards the end of my examples now, but we were also getting comments on how this pricing impacted on the academics and on teaching and learning. It's having a really negative impact on the way we're delivering education. So the author of this particular text, which we heard a lot, works for the university, and it is based around the module that they lead. There is 1,700 students on the module this year, and access to this book would have cost over £73,500. The librarians were able to negotiate a significant discount, but it's still over £25,000. I don't know about anybody here, but that is my entire budget for all of my courses, for all of my reading lists that I look after in the school. So for one book, for one module, that's just not possible. The hard copy book was £43.32, and that's through core text. We were getting similar numbers of students who were quoted very different prices. So this book is listed on 21 resource list, 700 students, and they were being quoted £70,000. It's rental access to the book for 12 months. So that will be a continuing, ongoing cost. We don't have anything like the money that we'd need to buy the books that are being requested. So another impact this was having on academic achievement was there were ebooks that might have been used for open book exams, and so students needed to access this book during their exams, but only 3 user licenses were offered, and at a price of £720, which is no good to students that were doing an exam around a particular book chapter or a particular book, this is an example that we heard quite often as well. We did have some comments about how after these titles were added to this list, which is open, publishers can see it, some of the prices did decrease. So it was noted on here that the price did decrease for a 3 user license, and it did match the print. So we had some small impacts, but on the whole, not very much in listing these prices. But I'm gonna, this is kind of repeating myself a little bit here, but this course was a new course, and the titles that were required were recommended by the accrediting body, and yet they weren't available to the library at all. They were sold to the school directly, and so we didn't have them in the library, and it was £700 per single user ebook, and these were the books that were needed for the entire course. But the accrediting body didn't really care when it was raised with them that the courses they were accrediting couldn't access the books through the library. We were also getting books that were withdrawn from sale and appearing in different suppliers' databases. So that's something I'm going to discuss later on, because Wiley Publishing have recently done that with ebooks, and they were appearing in other places for multiple times the price. So at least 3 well-known academic publishers raised the cost for a single user ebook by 200% or more with no warning. We had a sudden influx of exploding licenses that I've just talked about, increased bundling, so there's a high cost, poor value package of the titles, and access was restricted to particular cohorts, which resulted in front loading of costs, and it stopped libraries in operating in a way that libraries always have. So we've got a lot of cross-discipline subjects. Our books can be borrowed by any students at any time, and this stopped that browsing that students were traditionally able to do. Students couldn't access these books via our library service, which is increasingly what publishers are pushing for. They don't want libraries to lend their ebooks. Because of this, it was having the massive impact it was having on library collections was that the costs were ongoing. You weren't just buying the hard copy books and that was that. You could build your collection year on year, and we had to pay for the same books in multiple years. So our collections weren't growing. It's unregulated, unpredictable, and it risks lock-in dependence. So when I was talking before about universities that signed up to some of these deals during COVID, if you didn't renew that subscription, you would lose access to all of that collection and would have to start again. It is impossible to audit. Ebooks titles are dropping off of the aggregated packages, which we see with journal articles, and we've got no way of auditing that. the libraries were being passed all together. So as in the case of the biomed course that I talked about before, the publishers are doing direct selling to academic schools, which undermines our function. And also academics do not understand the complexities of ebook pricing and the ebook models, and that's a whole different conversation. So there was a lot of friction between libraries and academics who were being told by publishers that there's all this access to stuff if only the libraries would pay for it, and then the librarians saying, well, actually we can't access this stuff because of the limits they're putting onto the resources. We can't show them in our library system, we can't put them onto the virtual learning environments, this sort of thing. So friction was caused there. We can't budget for content provision because it's unsustainable. We don't know how much these packages are going to cost next year. And undue publisher influence on reading list content in turn impacts on curriculum content and academic freedom. So it's very much influencing the resources that we have got access to, which has never been an issue for us before to such an extent. I mean, I think that is a consequence that hasn't been talked about enough, is the way that this is impacting on curriculum design and curriculum delivery. Publishers' responses to complaints about this were that we are not, the examples that we listed weren't representative of the true picture. So it's like comparing apples to pears. So the Publishers Association said that a digital textbook is often put together using multiple authors over a long period of time, is regularly updated and has additional functionality, might be used by entire cohorts of students on a course or length thousands of times. Taylor and Francis said the same thing. And we argue this, and I mean, it was condescending at best, their response, because we are experts in how our users use our content and what they like and how they like to access these books. So most of us know that digital textbook is a PDF copy, scanned copy of the original. They are not regularly updated. They don't have additional functionality. Anybody with a screen reader can tell you that ebooks are a bit of a pig to use when we have complaints all the time. There's also been quite a few well-known studies done into the accessibility of ebooks. Hard copy books are used by entire cohorts of students on a course or lent thousands of times. So that's no different to ebooks. So the publishers just weren't willing to engage on a meaningful way. The data that we got on the spreadsheet was what got the interest of the national media. So we when we started our campaign, we got interest. We got an article in the Guardian, the Times Higher, 1KG. It trended on Reddit mainly because of these figures that we were sharing. And when we anonymized when we allow people to contribute anonymously, we got a lot more data than we were previously doing. Our colleagues in Ireland did a similar data collection campaign, and they were finding the same sort of figures. So with JISC, who are the negotiating body for higher education in terms of provision by publishers and this sort of thing, weren't getting anywhere with their negotiations with publishers. Sector leaders weren't seen to be doing anything either, despite librarians repeatedly going to them with the data and saying, this is what's happening, you need to help us. And so Ebook SOS was formed, mainly, as most of my campaigns are, through a bit of kind of grumbling on Twitter and several other people saying, yes, this is a problem, what can we do about it? And the core Ebook SOS team at the moment is me, subject librarian in Gloucestershire, Caroline Ball, who's a subject librarian at Derby University, and Rachel Bickley, who is a subject academic liaison librarian at London Met, although she has just moved to Australia, the lucky thing, and she is now a subject librarian at the University of Adelaide. So she's on a different time zone to us, but we're hoping that she's going to continue the Ebook SOS work in Australia, because this is a global issue, not just a UK one. So we're subject librarians, we have got no authority, we're doing this on top of our day jobs because there's a big vacuum in leadership in library sector in the UK. This is not a new phenomenon. I found it in when I was campaigning against public library cuts. I think sector leaders were very quiet then too, and it was mainly library workers that were leading the charge against library cuts. And I think disappointingly not very much has changed, although I have felt that campaigning in the higher education sector, people feel a lot more empowered to get involved and speak out than they might have done in public libraries, which I think is still a difficulty because of the politics involved. So what we did is we're completely unfunded, we don't have any proper formal resourcing, so we just do what we can with the resources that we've got, and I think we've done pretty well. So in summer of 2020 we wrote a letter calling on the UK government to investigate the practices of academic ebook publishing industry. We got over 1,000 signatures in the first week. We now have nearing 5,000 signatures. We got broad sector and cross-sector support. So a lot of NHS librarians signed the letter, public librarians, academics, authors, Creative Commons, CEO signed the letter. Huge diversity. The campaign was covered, as I mentioned, by the national press. In November 2020, the Education Select Committee replied, "We do not have the capacity to undertake this review," which didn't surprise us because it was right mid-pandemic. They had a lot on their plate, everybody did. But they said they were aware of the issue and they may question the Higher Education Minister if it was appropriate in the future. We hoped that the success of this open letter might get the likes of Research, Libraries UK, and CILIP and various other bodies, and JISC and SCONAL, and Universities UK to join the throng and lead this, but that didn't happen. CILIP did write a letter to the Competition and Markets Authority, which was great. We were really appreciative of that, but otherwise we got very little support and response from sector leaders. In fact, we got the opposite from some of the bodies who were quite worried about unintentioned consequences to our letter, and we might make the situation worse. But our argument was it couldn't get any worse. We can't buy books. So what else can we do? So in November 2020, as I mentioned, CILIP submitted a complaint to the Competition and Markets Authority because we thought that was the next step. If politicians weren't going to get on board, then the Competition and Markets Authority might. And those who aren't in the UK, I should say, if you're not in the UK, the Education Select Committee is a cross-party committee of members of Parliament who can ask questions of different departments. And the Competition and Markets Authority is an authority that oversees markets. They are connected to the government, but they are non-party specific, so they've got some autonomy, and they can look into broken markets. So CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, appealed to the Competition and Markets Authority, as did Paul Ayres from UCL. He's the pro-vice, I can never remember his titles, it's so long-winded, but he is very senior in libraries in UCL. So he wrote to the Competition and Markets Authority as well. They had a lot of sympathy with our situation and they showed a lot of interest, and we had quite a few meetings with the Competition and Markets Authority, and we know that our case was put to the board several times, but we kept getting put to the post by other more Markets Authority is their directors. They have a meeting quarterly, I think it is, and they discuss cases and decide what they might pursue next. And a lot of it is down to what resources that they have at the time. So the CEO of the Competition and Markets Authority is aware of our position, but the various things happened, and now they're a bit caught up with issues to do with the cost of living crisis. So it's not off the table at the moment, but I think it's going to be a long slog, and we keep reminding them that we're here. We did meet with the Department for Education advisor tasked with preparing a briefing paper for the university's minister, which only came about because of our lobbying. In October 2021, some of the other library bodies did start to get on board, and a joint statement was released. Sorry for all of the acronyms, but it takes it would be a lot of words if I stuck this all in. But basically, just I've talked about CILIP, Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals. Some of the consortiums like SUPC and NAG got involved. Research Libraries UK did eventually join in with a statement. The statement is publicly available, so I have put a list of resources at the end if you want to go and have a look at it. Very little has happened since then. So that was October 2021, and we're coming up to October 2022, and not much has happened from those bodies since then that I am aware of. The consortiums I know are still trying to push the publishers to come up with better deals, but they haven't been forthcoming. And we've had questions asked in the House of Lords. So for those of you that don't know, that is the upper chamber of Parliament that is unelected peers that can ask questions of ministers and government departments. So we had the Bishop of Gloucester and various other members of the House of Lords asking questions. They got very little back, but in terms of response, but it does keep raising the issues in the minds of ministers, which isn't a bad thing. Rolling forward to August 2022, we have now sent a renewed letter to the Education Select Committee because the ebook crisis has worsened, and we have got, my MP has been very supportive of our campaign, and he is looking to get together a group of cross-party MPs to go to the Education Select Committee supporting our letter. So that is in progress now. So we're hoping that something might come of this. In July 2022, we got wind by Freedom of Information request that the Department for Education were organising a stakeholder meeting roundtable about solutions to the ebook crisis. We were not invited. We don't know how people did get invites. We heard about it. We were told to do a Freedom of Information request after the event in order to find out who was invited. That meeting didn't go ahead because there was a resignation of the Prime Minister. So our ever revolving door of ministers in the government and the disarray that our government is in is making it very difficult for us to get any further with this campaign politically. So that meeting didn't go ahead. I did submit a Freedom of Information request to the Department of Further Education of Education to find out who was invited and why, and that deadline has overrun by several weeks. We haven't got a response to them, so we're still kind of chasing that up. A tinfoil hat makes me think that maybe publishers aren't willing to engage if we're invited, which is something I've experienced before. So we will keep pressing ahead with that, and hopefully the cross-party group of MPs might challenge this for us. So further impact, we've been invited to speak at over 20 different events nationally and internationally on the issue. We've put together the animated video that you saw at the beginning. We have co-authored author guidance to guide authors when they're negotiating with publishers, because a lot of our academics and publishers and authors have got no idea how their content is sold once they've signed over the rights to their work. So we're trying to encourage authors to be a bit more aware on what to ask for when they're negotiating with publishers. We were nominated for an International Open Publishing Award and the Lilac Lilac Information Literacy Award and shortlisted. We didn't win, but lots of other worthy people did, but it was nice to be nominated anyway. I've published a peer review article with Cahill, who is the president of the Library Association of Ireland, about the ebook crisis and our campaign for reform. And I've provided a link to the slides, and I would recommend a read of that, not just because I'm pushing something that I've written, but it gives quite a detailed overview of where we've come from and where we're heading, and the challenges that we've been facing. So we've worked hard to try and concisely explain the issues and of what we've been following, so of what we've been facing. So I would recommend a read of that. So where does this fit in internationally? Well, our first speaking event that we did for UCL attracted 700 registrations with participants from over 13 different countries. We've been invited to speak in South Africa, Germany, France, Canada, the States, Ireland, Denmark. Most of that was during COVID, so it was online. I was invited by the League of European Research Universities, who see themselves as the Ivy League of Europe, to speak to them in Copenhagen about the ebook crisis. And a lot of very senior people went, with a view to taking this matter up with the European Commission. So that was really positive. I got a trip to Copenhagen. It was the first thing I managed to go to in person since lockdown measures were lifted. Library Futures, who is a campaign group in the States, issued an international statement of solidarity that was signed by a lot of international figures and international libraries. I have included links to Library Futures later on because they're worth looking up. They're doing a lot of work in the States on the issue of ebooks and copyright. IFLA, so the International Federation of Library Associations, issued a statement that called on reform of copyright legislation to allow more fairer lending of ebooks. Knowledge Rights 21, if you've not heard of Knowledge Rights 21 yet, they're very worth looking up. So they're funded by the Arcadia Group, and it's very their setup is very complicated, but it's managed by IFLA and Arcadia and another foundation which I should know, and they've been given some funding to advocate for copyright reform in the EU, and there's lots of exciting stuff that's happening with them, and they released a position statement on ebooks and e-lending, and they are well, I'll talk a little bit more about their work later on, but they are trying to engage lots of different parties from across Europe in pushing for reform. I spoke at the World Library and Information Congress in the end of July, and it was very well received internationally, and there was demand for our open letter to take signatures from international contributions. So that is now open. Anybody can sign our open letter, and our campaign video, the animation at the beginning, has been translated into Polish, German, Danish, Italian, Portuguese. We've got an Arabic, Mandarin, French, Spanish and Irish versions in the pipeline. If anybody here wants us to translate it in a language that would help them, then we can send you the text, and if you'd like to send us the translation, we very happily make you a version with your translation in it. So that's been quite popular. The German Library Association has used our video as part of their campaign. They're running a campaign called Book is a Book, because the German public libraries, the publishers, are placing year-long embargoes on new titles in ebook format, and they're campaigning against that and for reform. And the German government it's part of their coalition agreement to look into ebook practices. So that's quite an exciting project that's happening. In Ireland, the Irish were early supporters of ebook SOS. The response we've got from them and sector leaders is very, very different to the UK. It's been led by the Library Association of Ireland and 4 key representative groups signed the call for action, including public libraries and government library, refreshing and very positive. And we've been supported by senior leaders in Ireland from the very beginning. And as I said, it's very, very different to what we've experienced in the UK. So they've briefed government departments and their own competition and consumer authority, who's shown some interest, and they got some space in national newspapers and on the front page of the national news. So they're working really hard to challenge ebook publishers as well. Germany, I've just mentioned them. So 600 heads of German libraries called for legal improvements in the lending of ebooks. And this was supported by IFLA. The European Commission, in the EU, the European Commission has begun investigating the need for legal and digital solutions to ebook lending. And as I've mentioned, Knowledge Rights 21 were launched. And they're
Yohanna, just to say, it's probably time to think if we want.
Sure, right. I'm very nearly at the end. Thank you.
It's
I did
okay.
say I waffled.
No, you haven't waffled at all. But time's.
They are. Thank you. They are working with IFLA, LIBA, and Spark Europe to promote the case for a challenge to copyright legislation at the moment. And I think that is where we are most likely to make headway if we don't in the UK. They are doing several different projects you can get involved in. I know this is supposed to be international and this is very European based, but I think that the European Commission will have a lot of influence if they take this on board. The USA, there's lots of litigation going on with the Internet Archive you may have heard about. So they have been scanning books that they own and lending them out digitally, which has resulted in some legal challenges which everybody is watching. And there's links here if you are not aware of them, but there's a lot going on in the States. There's also been state-specific legislative legislation that has been proposed where publishers have to sell ebooks to publishers at a reasonable cost. This has been challenged by publishers and thrown out, but Library Futures are working with legal scholars to come up with legislation that will allow for the reasonable cost sales of ebooks to libraries. So the States is a big player to watch at the moment. So while all of this is happening, the crisis continues to worsen. So Pearson increased their ebooks by 500% recently and are considering NFTs, which, if you don't know, blocks onward book sales. So they are trying to block the secondhand book market. I am no expert on this, but I've included a Guardian link so you can go and have a look at that. The academic publishing market has reported a 14% profit in the UK alone in the last financial year. And recently, Wiley has withdrawn key titles from ebook platforms, making them unavailable to libraries in the ebook format. And this was a week before the start of our new academic year. And some people haven't had any warning at all. So this skullduggery is still happening and getting worse. So as I said, I think the US litigation is going to be watched closely. The Internet Archive challenge, I think, is going to take years, possibly devastating impact on e-lending in the future. Knowledge Rights 21 Europe have put out calls for contributions to assist in building of a body of evidence to help further their goals in copyright reform. So they're looking for national coordinators within Europe. There's adverts, I've put links in the slides, where they're asking for national coordinators to collect evidence in their jurisdictions to give to Knowledge Rights 21. So Knowledge Rights 21 can put together a case to Europe to change copyright legislation. And they've also put a call out for initiatives that will support and build evidence for the Knowledge Rights 21 programme. I'm not going to go into any more depth in that because it's vast and there's lots of information on their website. But if you're interested, I'd very much recommend going and looking that up. So I am acutely aware that this is all kind of Western-centric voices here, and apart from South African input, we've had very little communication with anybody outside of the EU and the US. So I think that more global voices are needed, and I don't know how we go about doing that. I think ILIC is a good place to start. I think people globally can sign our letter and let us know if an edited animation version of our animation would help to make it more specific to the country that you're based in. I'd be very open to suggestions and hearing about what could happen on the global stage in terms of e-lending and ebook access. We're not doing very well at this at the moment. I'm hoping that IFLA and Knowledge Rights 21 will be able to facilitate some work on that because they've got a lot more resources than we do. But yeah, I'd be interested in hearing any ideas or suggestions. So yeah, thank you for listening. And if you've got any questions, then now is the time to ask them. And I've put a resource list together and my contact details if you want to chat about this any further. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can engage with any questions. I apologise if that was very hurried. There is a lot of information. A lot has been happening.
Thank you so much, Yohanna. I realise it's almost 6 o'clock, but that was so rich in content that I thought it was really useful for everybody. So some people may need to go, but if you're here for another 5 minutes or so, I hope we might be able to fit in a few questions. There weren't really any questions in the chat apart from, I've just lost my chat, just a minute, apart from a request for links and for the guidance for dealing with publishers in particular, and general cries of despair, I think, that the situation is not sustainable. Does anybody have any questions? If so, could you raise your hand? Any raised hands? I can't.
Is everyone awake still?
Can't see anybody. You're getting lots of thank yous. I think some people are going.
Here is a link to our resources. Sorry, that's the author guidance is on there, and a list of other resources. And will Alex share my slides so that people can access the links, or I can. We can do if you can. Because a lot of them are embedded. Because otherwise there's going to be a great long list. So, and if I share the slides, we can do that. Yeah, can I email you the slides or Jamie, and then you can. Share them.
So if there aren't any other questions, I suppose I would ask. Oh, Gerhard, you have your hand up.
Sorry, I didn't find the button in Zoom. It's in a different place in every one of these video packages. My question is, do you see the commercial publishers as part of a future solution, or will we just have to sideline them and get rid of them, do our own publishing?
I don't think that a solution to this is going to come from any one place. So I think we'd very much like publishers to still be involved. But I think if they don't start to talk with us in a meaningful way, they will have to find alternatives. I don't think, sorry, the puppies are getting involved. I don't think that the infrastructure's there at the moment to do that. Unfortunately, I wish it was, but I do think alternatives are going to have to be found, and they are in danger of isolating themselves from the market. But I don't know. If I'm honest, I don't know. And I think that's why we need a market investigation in an authoritative body, or a change in legislation to come in and look into this. Sorry, that's not an answer, is it? I don't know. I think at the current prices, I think it will be the end of libraries if they continue operating in the way that they if they're going to operate.
That's their goal. You know, publishers are frequently talking to academic departments or heads of programs also directly to try and license their stuff directly. They have no scruples at all. You know, they sell the same product to the same institution twice, once to the library, once to a faculty or so. You know, they're absolutely ruthless, and they have been for the last 30 years or so. So I wonder if it's wise to still consider them part of a solution, or if we shouldn't just increase our efforts at doing our own publishing. We've mentioned Paul Ayres. UCL has made enormous progress with their own publishing house. Isn't that the way forward?
It is a way forward, but that doesn't account for books previously published.
Yeah.
So going forward, it is part of the option. But then what do we do with books that are already in our collections that aren't available in ebook format? That, I think, is where the Internet Archive case is going to be really instrumental, because of the controlled digital lending aspect of it. And there was a ruling at the European Court of Justice about e-lending that said that we interpret as libraries should be able to lend books no matter what format they're in, but that is something that hasn't been challenged yet by a precedent, and the publishers would dispute that that's what it means. So I think it will take somebody on the European stage to challenge that with a precedent for controlled digital lending to be a solution in the EU, which might work in line with open access books that universities are that we're publishing ourselves. But so far, I think that the open access resources are coming far too slowly.
Yeah. Well, open access has done reasonably well in the field of research, but on the textbook side, there is just not much to show so far. And of course, textbooks need more editorial support, illustrations and whatever. So,
and that's where we need to start. That's where we need to start educating authors and what they're signing up to. So this withdrawing Wiley, the Wiley text, somebody quite rightly said to everybody complaining on Twitter, well, who signed this agreement with Wiley that allowed them to do this? And what we did, what libraries did. So, well, we're mainly because they probably felt they had no other option, but while we're still signing these hugely expensive packages, we're continuing to be in this. We're going to continue to be in this situation. So I think we have to educate people and change practice in order for open access to be feasible.
Yeah. Picking up that point, sorry, Johanna, picking up that point about educating people, there's a question in the chat from John Dolan, which I think is important. Do author bodies really understand this? How important is the academic author in trying to change the culture and the practice?
No, and in the US, the author, I can't remember what this association is. Authors are actively supporting the publishers against Internet Archive, and I think that's largely due to a misunderstanding of what Internet Archive is doing, or what controlled digital lending is doing. And I think that's been poorly communicated occasionally by advocates of controlled digital lending and what they're doing. I think in terms of authors in public libraries, I think more advocacy needs to be done on how ebooks are sold to public libraries. So Hatchet won't sell e-titles to public libraries in the UK at all, and I think that a lot of authors don't know that. But I think that the library sector in the UK is doing quite a poor job at educating people who aren't librarians as to what the issues are.
Yeah,
so
there are
yeah,
lots of comments appearing now in the chat about how to find out who's bought what, real costs. John Dolan has suggested the Society of Authors and Pen as possible contacts.
Yeah,
is the DCMS aware? So I think there are lots of issues. We probably only really got time. We were going to wrap up at 6 o'clock, but it's also interesting with such a big topic. We probably got time for one more question. If
I think can I just respond to your point really quickly with
of course.
There are 3 of us doing this, and we're all academic libraries, so librarians. So there's been lots of suggestions on things that we could do, but we're very limited in what we can do, and we are not experts in public libraries. So if anybody who is listening does work in public libraries and wants to find out more about what is happening, then I would encourage communication with CILIP, DCMS, writing to MPs, and helping us really raise the issue of it, because as I said, there's only so much that we can do. I mean, there's a lot going on with the DCMS, but we're not party to a lot of that, and we can't make CILIP do things that we can't make CILIP and other bodies do the things that they don't want to do. So
no, and as again John Dolan has just pointed out, we currently have a new government, so who knows. I think we should probably draw this to an end, because we could go on all evening, and we have slightly overrun our time, but I think it was absolutely well worth it. And I'd just like to thank Yohanna very much, both for her presentation today, and much more importantly for the work that she and her colleagues have been doing. Entirely, applause. Look, you can see all the clapping hands appearing on the screen. I know it hasn't been easy. Those of us who watch you on Twitter can see, you and your colleagues on Twitter can see what a huge amount of work it is. And I think we owe you a massive debt, and I hope that something really good comes out of it. So thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me and listening to me. There are ways people can help if you don't have time to get involved. We do have on our website, we have lots of ways that you can help. Sign our open letter. We've got t-shirts, we've got merch, we've got a PayPal funds that people can donate to, because we are doing this entirely off our own back. So there's lots of ways people can get involved. There's a JISC mailing list as well if people want to continue the conversation. I'm open to ideas.
Can you tell us what that's called, please? Because I was wondering how we should follow up.
Yes, so I think I didn't actually put it in let me just get a link to it. I didn't put there's my contact details on the slide, so if worst comes to the worst, you can contact me through that. But I don't know if I'm not very good with with the JISC mail thing. So the email is to the mailing list is I'm just going to pop it into the chat, is here, but I will add it to my slide, the last slide of how to get in touch with
Ebook SOS at
and then
mail.
people can sign up to it that way.
So let me recommend that everybody who has really appreciated this presentation this evening join that list and continue the conversation.
Thank you. I have tried to share it, but it's trying to share my login, which it's not the most easiest to use.
Okay.
confusing.
So
but-
I think we should probably stop there. So thank you very much
Yeah.
indeed, everybody.
But
for
thank you,
attending.
everyone.
And
It's a
thank you,
giant
Yohanna.
topic
And I
that we'll
hope your
rumble
puppy
on.
gets. Sorry,
It's a giant topic that will rumble on, I think.
it
So-
is. You should come back. Don't wait 10 years. Come back in a year and tell us about the successes that have happened in the.
Oh, I'd love to. Well,
course of
hopefully
the
there'll be
next few
more
months.
international activity and we can get some more global voices, because I am, you know, it is, as I said, it's very kind of Western centric kind of.
Yes. And these companies are global business, aren't they?
Yeah,
They're
they're
not
huge
UK.
global businesses.
They're
Yeah.
huge global business. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for your kind comments. So I'm going to take the puppy out for a walk.